He's a stone-cold liar. I respect the presidency. I've tried to have an open hand with him, tried to work with him. Can't work with Donald Trump. You can only work for him. And I will not. I refuse to work for Donald Trump.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is now calling his city's homeless encampments unacceptable, which is odd since he's the guy who, made them acceptable. Turning sidewalks into red carpet events for drug addicts, thieves, and unemployed CNN.
It wasn't caused by an intense workout or spicy food. I barely survived the chaos unfolding on screen. This felt like a front row seat to political madness happening live. When Gavin Newsom stepped in, he expected another smooth showing, armed with rehearsed lines and a polished, camera-friendly grin. Then Greg Gutfeld burst onto the scene without warning, crashing in like a comedic wrecking ball. What followed felt unavoidable. With each passing second, confidence slipped, control weakened, and calm composure slowly fell apart before everyone's eyes. And
if you've been watching this show, and I know you have, we were the first to call out Gavin's bizarre hand movements. Remember this classic?
Conditions that determine our fate and future. And that fundamental notion of agency, I think, is important more broadly. And I think that goes to some of the issues around, victimization. And I see a lot of that, respectively, on the right, increasingly, even with Trump often approaching things from that sort of mindset.
Then even Trump.
Before shifting into the next stage, there's one thing to be clear about. If you don't want to miss or replay this moment, hit like and subscribe. A flawlessly practiced political smile slammed straight into a sharp late-night smirk, and the space barely had a second to breathe before the tension shot through the roof. The atmosphere filled instantly with a silent alert. It was clear this exchange wouldn't stay calm, polite, or lightly entertaining for long.
I'd be lying, and I can't do that. Well, since you can't lie, what tequila were you nursing while the Pacific Palisades burned? And what was it like banging your campaign manager's wife? Of course, he's just waiting for us to forget that his state looks like an overturned porta potty. But with fake crime statistics and fake boobs, why not have a fake governor? In an interview last week, Newsom painted himself as a latchkey kid struggling to make ends meet.
It was also about paying the bills, man.
Gavin Newsom walked onto the stage carrying the familiar confidence of a governor, the kind shaped by nonstop applause, flattering lights, and cameras that never stop rolling. Right behind him was Greg Gutfeld, appearing as though his role was to stir the pot from the very start. With nothing more than sharp timing and a clever grin, he was fully prepared to do just that.
So Newsom is fed up with tent cities, the crime, the urban decay? No, he's not mad about that stuff. He's mad you noticed. It's like a criminal telling a jury he's sorry he robbed 25 banks when he's just sorry he got caught on the 26th. Because this isn't some spontaneous crisis. It's a man-made disaster like Chernobyl or Fox and Friends. The man who made it acts like he had nothing to do with it. Yeah. It's pure government grift, shoving you down a flight of stairs and then making you pay for the hand.
It all started with the relaxed rhythm of polite small talk. With every measured breath, Newsom's posture reflected seasoned authority. This was the confidence built over years of routine press events where questions feel expected and real challenges are treated more like faint distractions than true tests.
He's pretending that he's like this scrappy underdog, but he really is an elite overdog that hasn't done anything of any difference or value for California, so he has to pick fights. I mean, think about the response to the Palisades fire. Like, nothing has happened. That's on his watch. There's the exodus of people leaving California. There's the taxes, like you say. There's corruption. And I think he's trying to say, look, I can have fun and spar with podcasts.
Much like the first moments of a disaster movie, everything appeared calm, orderly, and almost too perfectly arranged. With no visible signs of trouble and no one watching the warning signals, Gutfeld held back. He allowed the rhythm to settle, giving everyone time to feel safe and at ease before shifting anything at all.
Earlier this week, Gavin unleashed his inner 10-fingered freak.
I came into that recall campaign still arguing that all politics is local. I still had a romantic notion of that. I intellectualized that a lot of our politics and the discourse was national. I didn't fully appreciate how nationalized our politics have become. In so many ways, that shape-shifted a lot of what we're doing and who I am today. But this last year, these last 6-7 months, this is something altogether different.
It's like he's molested.
It was the kind of reassurance that lowers your guard, a feeling that everything is steady and under control right up until it isn't. Gutfeld offered a relaxed smile and released the first gentle poke. It was quiet enough to seem harmless, yet sharp enough to test the ideas beneath the surface. Newsom brushed it aside smoothly, clearing it away without effort. In political terms, it was like straightening a tie before stepping back under the bright lights to regain command. But Gutfeld doesn't throw random shots. He waits until the board is crowded with your own talking points, then starts landing points with your strongest claims. The mood shifted from easy familiarity to harsh clarity, exposing every carefully hidden flaw, and the second strike carried real force. It hinted that trouble was building just out of sight, even though Newsom's expression barely changed. One by one, Gutfeld calmly stacked observations, pointing out contradictions, recycled promises, and statements that hadn't delivered results. The audience stayed quiet. In that tense pause, when it felt like everything could tip at any second, they leaned in closer, waiting for what would happen next.
Newsom let homelessness run wild. He allowed tens of billions of dollars to be swallowed up by a maze of consultants, nonprofits, and bureaucrats who created poop mats. It's sad. Californians used to sell maps of celebrity homes, not landmines. Now, instead of sightseeing, tourists play hopscotch so their shoes don't get hepatitis. And when residents complain, they're called cool. And now we're supposed to believe.
Newsom kept nodding along, the familiar gesture of someone acting as if they still have the wheel, even while the vehicle is already sliding downhill with no brakes in sight. His replies grew firmer, more forceful. The glossy exterior began to show tiny cracks, revealing tension that couldn't stay hidden for long. He leaned on rhythm and repetition, but the key phrase meant to redirect the question kept stumbling, like trying to dance just as the floor shifts beneath your feet. In moments like this, there's always a point where staying afloat matters more than looking polished. When that instant arrives, it lands with the sharp shock of glass shattering in a quiet cafe. Gutfeld wasn't being reckless. He was precise. Suddenly, Newsom seemed to be swinging a padded sword while facing real steel. The audience reacted in ripples. At first, a few controlled laughs slipped out when a point landed a little too cleanly. As the exchanges continued, those laughs grew louder and lasted longer. There was no anger in the room, only amusement. That distinction mattered. Being challenged in public is uncomfortable, but being laughed at cuts deeper. Newsom leaned on his title and his spotless resume for balance, yet each move to reclaim control exposed another weak spot. Gutfeld allowed him to stack confident claims into a tall structure, then quietly removed a single key piece and watched the whole thing tremble.
Story, except that it's about as flimsy as the drawstring on J.B. Pritzker's moo-moo. Because while Gavin was hustling, he was featured in a Children of the Rich article detailing his ties to billionaire oil man Gordon Getty. His dad worked for the Gettys, and the same Getty fortune bankrolled Gav's first business venture, a winery. This guy owned a wine shop at 24 years old, back when yours truly was still doing nude models.
By now, the energy had shifted from competitive to unpredictable. Instead of raising his voice, Newsom's tone tightened, cutting sharply through the room. His expression revealed someone who had suddenly realized they were in a genuine confrontation, and his words began coming faster and narrower. He seemed to assume he had already won, but there was no dramatic explosion to signal victory. Instead, he was swept up by a tide of defensive momentum. Gutfeld simply observed, as if watching a fire consume its own fuel. He didn't rush, dominate, or interrupt. He let the moment burn itself out. When Gutfeld finally reemerged, it was as if nothing had happened, his relaxed smile and easygoing demeanor now carrying an unmistakable edge. Newsom, by contrast, faltered midway through a comeback, gasping for air. The contrast said it all. One man was clearly enjoying himself while the other struggled. The exchange grew even funnier the more Newsom leaned on authority, his earnest statements landing as accidental comedy. Gutfeld didn't need to exaggerate. Reality provided all the drama. Newsom tried again, one more redirection, one more attempt to regain control, one more flawless defense. Gutfeld responded quietly, letting implication do the work instead of volume, delivering yet another precise checkmate. At that moment, the audience shifted from mere amusement to full-blown excitement, reacting faster and louder, almost anticipating each move before it landed.
Our commentary on his hands have gotten inside his head, and Gavin now is desperately trying to control himself, and they're not.
Well, it's a curious question. I made the entire point that crime's an issue, and we want to
tackle it. And we continued to do more in that space. And we announced,
Poor guy. I want you to watch again as his errant thumb valiantly, violently resists.
It felt as if the ground beneath Newsom was slipping away, each pause landing like a heavy drumbeat as he struggled to keep his composure. Every long response carried the risk of giving Gutfeld another opening. Even in his most earnest explanations, traces of unintended humor surfaced. His reaction wasn't frantic or chaotic, but his posture stiffened, his jaw tightened, and his once polished confidence began to feel brittle. The smooth exterior that had withstood pressure now started to crumble, making the tension impossible to hide. Gutfeld skillfully highlighted how Newsom represented grand promises and lofty rhetoric meant to rise above reality. He widened the lens, shifting the focus and reframing the conflict to show the bigger picture, allowing those lofty ideas to soar only to reveal how far they strayed from reality. The evening's most powerful response came in that straightforward observation. It wasn't loud or rude, it was precise, the kind of truth that inevitably carries weight. The audience didn't erupt in laughter. Instead, they recognized an answer that worked too perfectly to ignore. From that moment on, Newsom's replies carried the heavy awareness of being closely scrutinized, and he could feel it.
So why do I keep bringing up Gavin? Well, other than my respect for his work in American Psycho, he's starting to distance himself from his party's worst ideas. Newsom, a guy who hates fossil fuels but could still bring down the price of gas by wringing out his hair, once proclaimed that his state would be a sanctuary to all who seek it. Then people actually came, tons of them, moving faster than a mob of Walgreens.
Every attempt Newsom made to regain control rang oddly hollow, as if his words had lost their weight. A restless tension clung to every movement and pause, lingering long after the initial eruption had peaked. His body language began telling the story more clearly than his words ever could. The governor, once so composed, now leaned forward too often in a bid to signal urgency, his hands betraying a subtle tremor that exposed his weakening grip. He monitored every exchange meticulously, revealing how little margin for error he believed he had. For him, the conversation had ceased to be enjoyable. It became a struggle to keep a narrative on track, a story slipping further from his control. Gutfeld, by contrast, reclined with effortless ease, not arrogance, but calm command, creating a striking, almost cinematic contrast to some. His timing was impeccable, jokes landed with precision, and his commentary flowed without rush. Even Newsom's strongest lines felt artificially propped up in comparison. Gutfeld's calm descended smoothly, yet the tension remained, a contained, controlled, and smoldering heat. Newsom had grown cautious, but the moment had passed. Everything that followed was already shaped by the earlier flair. The audience, influenced by the previous laughter, now listened with sharper ears and more skepticism, fully attuned to each word, and paused.
Problems of the last decade were based on his and his party's lies. A man can grow his hair out and play girl sports. A gangbanger can claim he's oppressed. That homeless junkie, he's just an out-of-work artist. See, Newsom wasn't just ignoring the problem, he enabled it because Dems were in a woke crouch, terrified of their loony base. But now that he's seeing the White House, he's got a brand new act, a common-sense centrist, just a soccer dad in khakis, fed up with crime and chaos. It's all bull costume, a political drag show, and the kids this drag queen is reading.
Gutfeld stepped back and reorganized his earlier points, shaping them into a clearer, more cohesive picture instead of repeating himself. It was like arranging pieces on a board so precisely that the overall strategy became impossible to misread. The exchange had already revealed its conclusion in plain sight. There was no need for a final strike. Newsom responded calmly, giving himself credit where it was due, moving forward with whatever rhythm he could still claim, while keeping his composure and avoiding outright anger. Yet the earlier eruption had permanently altered that rhythm. That moment had been pivotal, and its aftershock colored every word that followed. It wasn't just the pressure. Newsom could feel the audience instantly recognize the shift. For any politician trained to manage stress, that awareness is a true destabilizer. Gutfeld widened the frame again, allowing space for discussion while subtly reshaping it without noise or force. It wasn't aggressive domination, it was the quiet, persuasive kind of control that directs everything else. The eruption gradually cooled, becoming subdued and transparent. Newsom moved from a posture of leadership to one of constraint, relying on persistence and measured restraint. He focused on managing what remained rather than trying to seize control of the story itself.
So last week, Newsom said he hopes the conservative Supreme Court will overturn the current law that bans his state from removing out-of-control homeless encampments. Imagine that. Well, what did you expect, Gavin? That the sanctuary seekers were going to show up in Winnebagos? Once again, another example of a high-profile lib using his big mouth to write a check his ass can't cash. Last year, after the Texas Governor Abbott ordered that parents of transitioning children should face criminal investigation, Newsom then tweeted this: "Trans kids and their families should be..."
The shift was immediately noticeable to the audience. As the exchange slowed and took on a more reflective pace than anyone expected, reactions settled into a steady rhythm. They had already witnessed the explosive moments they'd been anticipating, but instead of one massive detonation, it was a series of precise strikes that gradually tilted the ground beneath Newsom's feet. Gutfeld remained relaxed, his final gestures almost delicate. Once the advantage was secured, there was no need for a knockout. He didn't shout or punctuate his closing points with force. That quiet composure became the evening's most important lesson, allowing everyone to settle comfortably into the space. Newsom stood, trying to reclaim his original footing, but the effects of the confrontation lingered even in the brief pauses before he spoke. Those pauses echoed everything that had occurred. It might have seemed like a light shower, but it felt like the aftermath of a storm, yet there was a sense of clarity that comes after a true transformation. No debris littered the stage, but the space had been subtly rearranged. The moment's power didn't come from chaos or noise, it came from the inversion. Titles and resumes may impress at first glance, but it is time and tone that reveal who truly controlled the room and who struggled to keep up.
It wasn't even one of those poor kids. Hell, poor kids don't have pet otters like Gavin did. Gavin actually had a pet otter, which also means he had pet fish to feed said otter. But he's lucky he started from privilege. He never had a real job. And once he gained power, he counts on Wikipedia editors to make him working class. And then you count on nobody bothering to look it all up, which is a bad strategy in this day of Grok and ChatGPT and a public who no longer believes anything.
Gutfeld opened the evening with a masterful performance, yet without raising his voice or forcing the moment, he became the room's center of gravity, pulling everyone into his orbit. The eruption shifted from mere irritation to pure exposure, the kind of impact that lingers in the audience's memory long after the cameras stop rolling rather than fading in a single flash. From their seats, viewers could sense every shift in real time, pinpointing the exact moment the balance tipped. Even after filming ended, the conversation carried on. Comment sections, green rooms, and corners of the internet replayed each gesture, word, and subtle expression as if every viewer were a detective hunting for clues. Over time, that eruption became a recurring cycle of scrutiny. Newsom's team acted quickly, speaking with calm authority, aiming to restore composure, like pressing a suit back into perfect shape. Their message was clear. It had been a heated exchange, nothing extraordinary. Yet, in the digital age, timing, posture, and the precise instant a rhythm falters are indelibly captured. Photos speak louder than words, preserving every nuance and memory. The moment and its effects remained alive long after the lights went down.
The law was proposed that judges in custody cases favor the parent who supports transitioning a child's new gender. Newsom killed that law quicker than a late-term abortion. Yeah, I know, huh? Now the left, being the left, was outraged, but they missed something, because now Newsom says he only vetoed it since it's already the law. That's a nice one, dude. You gotta admit, this guy's so oily he should join OPEC. But what a magician. Only he pulls excuses out of his butt instead of...
Gutfeld didn't need to replay or revisit what had happened. He let the silence work for him, knowing it carried more weight while everyone else scrambled to explain themselves. His edge wasn't in speaking repeatedly about the moment. It was in letting it stand on its own, like a frozen frame that lingers in the mind long after it occurs. The most striking part of the encounter was how ordinary it all seemed on the surface, proving that subtle disruptions can unsettle even the most refined systems far more than loud chaos. Preparing for a storm is straightforward. No one is ready for a sudden shift in gravity. In hindsight, Newsom's outburst seemed less like anger and more like a clear break from a carefully maintained routine. External pressures and internal tension collided in plain view. From that moment on, everyone knew exactly where to look the next time a flaw appeared, even if it had been superficially fixed. The exchange became a blueprint for how quickly power can shift when comfort and time are disrupted, long after the laughter fades and the clips stop circulating. Quietly, it was obvious who truly controlled the room and who was left struggling to stay upright without any shouting, argument, or dramatic exit.